Today I bring you a model I have built a total of 4 times now, all by request, and given how rare the kit is, that kind of blows me away. It's an interesting subject and one I think you might enjoy, so join me as I take you through the steps I took to build Edelweiss. This is Edelweiss. It's a fictional tank from a computer game with a cult-like following, and as you will see, has a lot of design elements based around a Panzer III with a cartoon-like spin to it. I built Shamrock a couple of months back, but this Edelweiss tank, which is from the same computer game, seems to have found its way into the hearts of the gamers and has become very popular. I begin the construction with the interior. Although a lot of this is going to be hidden, it still gives me the opportunity to enjoy the process and create something a little bit special, even if it'll only be occasionally caught through a glimpse of an open hatch. Like with any successful interior, it's all about sub-assemblies, and this model, even though it's highly simplified, is no different. The model was released by Zokimura in 35th scale, and that was released a number of years ago now, and it's become pretty hard to find. And those of you lucky enough to find one on eBay are usually turned off by the exorbitant amount that they command. As you've been watching on screen, you may notice I've been spraying and painting with acrylic paints. Now this is something a little different for me, as I generally spray with acrylic lacquers. However, the colours for this tank are quite specific, and the Vallejo colours seem to hit the mark. In saying that, the shells were painted in a brass colour from Alclad. Now Alclad is a lacquer paint, and I've used that mainly because I don't feel acrylic paint gives that same finish to a metallic part that a lacquer can. Basic techniques like dry brushing and sponge chipping are used to give some of those parts in the interior a lift, and with the basic assembly of the interior complete, I could then look to build the walls of that hull section and move on to the running gear. Painting a model like this gives me an opportunity to paint with colours that I wouldn't usually see building armour, so by that way of thinking, it's a nice change of pace. Painting the wheels is fast-tracked by first priming them in a German grey, as that will give me the colour for the rubber, and then using a spraying template, I can fill in the centres of the wheels with the appropriate colours. This is a quick and easy way to get a clean and tidy result over your wheels. Now this template is from Royal Models. If you can find it, they're pretty hard to find these days, but there are alternatives out there. But this template has honestly paid for itself many times over. A Citadel paint called Lead Belcher is used to add the worn look around the metal parts of that drive sprocket and the idler wheel, and then the wheels can be fit in place. The tracks are supplied in preformed lengths and have been painted in Tamiya Dark Iron to give them that foundation colour, and it's then just a case of piecing the lengths around the wheels bit by bit. And I know I harp on about it a bit, but try not to use modelling cement when the parts have been painted, because it can make a real mess if you're not careful. Instead, try using super glue as your go-to in this instant. It dries incredibly hard and sets off very fast, and it won't disrupt the paint, making the assembly of this section quite joyful. It was a common thing for the leading edges of metal tank tracks to get a polished effect over them as they drove over sand and gravel, and this makes for an interesting detail on a model like this. The leading edges are treated to a dry brushing technique using an aluminium acrylic paint. Now moving that brush in a scrubbing motion over the raised elements of the tracks is allowing that aluminium paint to catch those uppermost edges, giving me the effect that I was looking for. A quick round of enamel washes can then be added to selective areas in the interior of that hull, being mindful that most of this isn't actually even going to be seen, and then the top of that hull could be sealed in place and the front mud guards could be glued in place as well. As mentioned, this one is being built by request or on commission if you like. I'm telling you this because, like with any custom request, you are bound by the customer's desire for the look and the finish of the finished model, as well as agreeing to a sum, and that comes with a timing element attached to it as well. It then becomes a matter of building this model in a timely fashion, as well as meeting the client's expectations around what the finished product might look like. It's a balancing act of managing time versus expectation and fighting the urge to paint it the way you might want it and delivering it on how the person paying actually wants to see it. It's a real shift in mindset. I'd been working away on the turret interior along with the hull sections because doing that leads to efficiencies with the painting process and generally allows the build to flow in a more cohesive way. All of the techniques that I used for the hull interior naturally translate to the turret elements as well. Here again you see me using a dry brushing technique, and you can see how I'm unloading the paint from the brush before gently rubbing it against the part. This technique is allowing all of that raised detail of that sculpt to catch that metallic paint and present it in an interesting way. I spoke into the idea of building this kit as a series of sub-assemblies, and in order to fast track the painting, I pre-painted as much of the stowage and the tools as I could off the model. Now yes, I will have to deal with a few touch-ups once these pieces are removed from the sprues, however that would be an easy thing to deal with once it was in place on the model. Because the wheels and tracks had been pre-painted, I had to mask them with some painter's tape so I could then go on to spray the first colour in this camouflage sequence. When masking and painting camouflage, you really have to think about it in reverse. What are the secondary colours and what is the main colour? What's going to be easiest and the smallest elements to mask up? So by that way of thinking, my first coat was Luftwaffe uniform and it was set aside to dry for 24 hours. Now the acrylics can be a little more temperamental than lacquers are to spray with, but they are considered to be lesser of the two evils when it comes to the smells they produce. One piece of advice though when spraying with acrylics is to use a brand appropriate thinner to give you the greatest chance of success. The other important thing to consider when using acrylics is the model really needs to be primed, which is something I was a little bit slack here with this build, but priming allows the paint to better adhere to the model and is strongly suggested, especially when painting with these acrylics. So in this case, it's a bit of a do as I say rather than what I do. I designed a mask set for this model years ago and it was time to dust it off again. The pieces of the pre-cut vinyl mask are laid in place over the model and these will define the shapes of that dark blue. Running masks over deep recesses and raised detail can be a tricky proposition at the best of times, but by maintaining my airbrush angle as close to 90 degrees from the surface of the model as I can, I should be able to hold straight lines from the masks even if they are bridging over recesses. The blue-grey is applied all over the model and then the next round of masking can be applied once that had had time to dry. Light grey is the next colour up and I test the contrast of that colour on a small segment of skirt armour and once happy, apply it over the whole model. The other thing to consider when spraying over masks is not to flood the surface of that model with too much paint. Doing so can result in paint bleeding under the masks or sometimes leaving a defined, hard edge to the colour when you remove the mask. Working in misted and modest layers and building that colour up will help avoid any of these issues. And before too long, I could start removing the masks. The shape of the white camouflage on the barrel is defined using a noodle of blue tack, and once in place, detail around the model can be brush painted. I'm using a fine brush and a mix of acrylics to pick out the detail. Acrylics make for the perfect style of paint to apply with a brush because they are water-based and can be built up in layers. Now what that means is I'm able to build up the opacity of that colour with a few thin layers without fear of the paint being reactivated with a solvent. Lacquers and enamels do not afford you that luxury. Don't expect to be able to get a clean and complete coverage with one pass of an acrylic paint. Your finish will be so much nicer with multiple thin coats, letting the paint fully dry between each of the layers. With all the detail painted, the skirt armour and stowage could then be attached again using a super glue. Coating the model in a gloss varnish is always good practice before applying your decals because, in theory, it should provide you with the smoothest possible surface to adhere your decals to, and that should help you avoid issues like silvering. I tend to use a rattle can of Mr. Colour UV gloss and literally blast it on outside because of the fumes and the overspray. But even the smoothest and glossiest surface still requires some assistance with a decal softener. With the decal in position, I flood the surface of that decal and let it settle in place. Now the softener helps that form into the surface of the model, and it can be helped along with a cotton bud and some gentle pressure. Take care, however, because it does make that decal very soft and prone to damage. Once the decals had dried off, an all-over VMS satin varnish is flood coated over the model, and this seals the decals in place and will protect them against the weathering stages that are about to follow. Starship Filth is a pre-thinned enamel wash product, and by holding the loaded brush against the recess, I'm able to get that paint to travel through and around the recesses and details. Because this is an enamel based paint, it is thinned with a mineral spirit or a white spirit. What that means is because I'm painting over the acrylic base, I can use a white spirit to reactivate that enamel layer and move and modify it if it's gone to places I don't want it to be. The acrylic base layer should be unaffected by the white spirit as long as you are reasonably reserved with the amount you are introducing to the surface of the model. It can reach a point where it becomes an issue though, so err on the side of caution. Cleaning up excess wash is a satisfying task because you see the shapes on the model materialize and the colors of that scheme all begin to coordinate and integrate with each other. If the wash hasn't had a lot of time to dry, you can even remove and manipulate it with a simple makeup sponge. The Starship Filth works beautifully with those blue tones, but for the leather sections, a dark brown will complement those colours even better. Don't be afraid to use different colour washes over your model. The wash colour should be considered and work with the base colour you're applying it over. You're essentially turning up the shadowed areas in those elements, so that must work with the tones that are already there. Now, weathering a model is where I get the most joy, but for this one, I was asked to keep it to a minimum, so some basic earth effect enamels were applied through the tracks and the lower edges of the skirts, just to take the edge off the look of the model, and that's where I'll be calling it done. Building a model for someone else has its advantages in that you have the opportunity to create something truly unique and special for them to enjoy. However, I do find it can stifle the creative process and become a little bit of a chore than a creative endeavour. Given that I've built this model many times previously, I did slip into an autopilot mode a bit and really had to fight the urge to chip and weather it as I would have had it been going into my own collection. But at the end of the day, this beautiful hobby of ours is most enjoyable when we use it as an escape. An escape from the everyday, an escape from the noise of life. That one task or technique you've been thinking about and then get the opportunity to execute it on the modelling bench. The quiet that brings and the feeling of achievement when it comes off. It's a feeling like no other, and a feeling that can be a little bit lost when building to a brief. I will talk into some of the considerations around building on commission in an upcoming video, but for now I'm looking to focus on things that bring me the most joy. And speaking of joy, if you've enjoyed watching this evolve, please hit the like button, and if you are subscribed, then thank you. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, it means a lot. And thank you to my amazing Patreons as always. I'm really dialing that additional content up on that platform, so if you'd like to connect over there and immerse yourself in this amazing hobby and potentially upgrade your skills in the process, then I'd love to see you there. And you should know by now, guys, if you don't already, this is the greatest hobby in the world. Share it with your family and share it with your friends, and let's be proud of what we do. Until next time, I'll see you soon.
Oh my god, it's so colourful.